Welcome back to the In Between podcast. We've got a solo episode for you today, and I'm really excited to be sharing some of my in between moments of my life. I am going to start doing this at least once a month, hopefully, talking about certain in betweens and how I dealt with them. Because I think one thing I've learned from all of our guests here at the In Between podcast is that each in between moment is very different than the next one. So even if you've gathered all these incredible tips and you've gotten yourself through the in-between, the next one's going to hit you and you may deal with that one completely different than how you dealt with the previous one. I want to give you guys more examples as it pertains to my life and how I have handled in-between moments. So we're going to take you back on a journey, and I believe it was, 2020, everyone's favorite year. It's towards the end of 2020. I had done, to paint the picture, at this time I was living in Florida and I was a Pilates instructor. I was living there out of college and I was a full-time Pilates instructor as well as a personal trainer. I had started a little side business doing personal training outside during COVID to make sure that people could still work out because our gyms were closed, obviously. It was COVID, all of that. And coming out of COVID, at the time I lived in Florida, it was a little different there than the rest of the world because honestly, a lot of things didn't shut down. I remember coming to Vegas for my sister's bachelorette and the world was actually shut down. Florida had its own version of that. And so coming out as life got back to normal and going back into work, I really just started to develop a deep depression. And it wasn't my first bout. I had gone through about 2 previous bouts of depression. And I call them bouts because for me, they're not something that is continuous. It gets really bad and I'm in the thick of it. And eventually I do get myself out of it. But they're deep and they're difficult to deal with. And I immediately have to get on medicine and up my therapy. And that's just how I personally deal with it. But this bout of depression was a lot deeper than the previous ones had been. And I think looking back, it was because I was recognizing that a change and a shift needed to happen, but I wasn't making the change or the shift, right? I saw what needed to happen. There were things that needed to change, but instead I was resistant to it. And I was like, okay, I am not going to look at that. I'm not going to address it yet. And so it only made the depression and anxiety worse. And so it eventually got to a tipping point where I had to come back to Las Vegas, where my parents and my family live, and get some help. And so I come here for a month. And within that, I have incredible parents who helped me get into a treatment called ketamine. And I did a 2-week round of ketamine treatment. Ketamine, I don't have all the specifics right now. If it's something that you guys want to know more about, I definitely can do more research. But back then, and I think even currently, it has a lot of research on helping with anxiety, depression, and specifically PTSD, and essentially helping to rewire your brain. And it happens pretty fast. I would say I went from being tired, staying in my room all day, kind of isolating, to suddenly one day, 3 days into treatment, I wanted to go on a walk. And so automatically I'm like, this is great. I feel changes. And the reason that I think ketamine was such a help for me, it's not a fit for everyone, is that it lifted my depression cloud that was just hanging over me at all times. It lifted that. And so I was able to properly apply myself in therapy, through journaling, all these different tools that I had in my toolkit. I wasn't able to apply them because there was this shield on me of depression. And suddenly, with the ketamine helping lift that off, I was able to actively be a participant in therapy and help make the changes that I needed to make. I ultimately had to come to a decision of, was I going to go back to Florida and continue my life there? Or would I move back to Las Vegas and come and live in Las Vegas? Ultimately, I obviously made the decision to come back to Las Vegas. That's where I'm currently at. But it was a very difficult decision because I have a lot of people out in Florida that I love. And because of the loss of my brother, I have a really difficult time processing leaving people. I have a deep belief that if I leave someone, that they will leave me and they may pass away or something could happen or they don't want to be a part of my life. And so the battle I was fighting with myself was this lie, essentially, that every time I leave someone, these people are going to leave and forget about me. And I had to choose to be brave and courageous and choose myself and then prove myself wrong. And so I ended up going back to Florida for the month of January. I worked just a little bit. I made it through, and then I packed up my stuff. My sister came with me and we flew back to Vegas, and I had a small part-time job for a corporate PR company, but at the time that was all I had. And I just didn't love the job. I didn't know what I wanted to do. All I knew is that I needed to get my mental health in order to continue trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and where I wanted to go, and if I wanted to take a career change. When I got back to Las Vegas, I immediately started auditioning for different Pilates studios, but I didn't love it. I didn't even get on a full-time schedule. I taught a couple classes just to make some money, but I didn't love it, and I knew I didn't want to stay in it. I think this is another tangent, but the thing that people don't realize about fitness careers is they are very draining, because it is essentially similar. I don't know, I'm not a therapist, but I think it would be similar as to being a therapist, in the sense that like you're taking on a lot that people tell you. They don't want to work out. They're telling you their life stories, all these different things, and you're having to make sure you are not taking on those emotions at the same time. So that can be difficult. And so in that, I knew I didn't want to go back full time. So I carefully only chose a couple classes that I would begin to teach. And I think the biggest and most difficult part of this was that while I was experiencing the depression, I really had to come to terms with the fact that the depression really wasn't the biggest issue. The PTSD was. I had dealt with a lot of trauma in the years previous, and I went to Florida and I had this great life, and I was kind of not neglecting it in a way, but it just wasn't time to address how it actually affected me. And this bout of depression really was like, okay, time to address these things that happened. And so some things that helped me during that in-between moment of my life would be obviously the ketamine intervention medically. That was something that was extremely important for me to get through that moment of my life. Trying to develop a routine that fit that phase of my life. Before that started happening and I was becoming depressed, I was someone who went to the gym all the time. I was super active. I did all these things. Eventually, my therapist was like, hey, I'm going to write you a prescription, and the prescription is going to be to do nothing but make sure you're eating, make sure you're drinking, make sure you're getting sunlight. So like the most basic list of to-dos that I could do. And my only goal, okay, did I eat today? Did I get food in my body? Did I drink enough water? And so having a very like simple routine for me to do gave me the motivation to do it, but it also wasn't hard. Anything that felt hard is going to feel too hard, and you're not going to be able to sustain it because you're going to get defeated. So make it simple on yourself. If it's just eating, even if it's once a day, okay, great, you did that. I think also spending time with people in the moments that I could. My sisters would invite me to do things. At the time, one of my sisters was living at home, so we would do things together. And it's just like, even if it's just watching a TV show, being around other people and their energy can help you to become aware of where your negative thoughts are coming in. And I know during my ketamine treatment, one of my sisters had brought me, and we would go to lunch or we would do things and just try to get a little bit out of the house, but nothing that felt too hard or too painful. And then evolution, right? Like as the weeks went on and I started feeling better, I was able to add more tasks to my to-do list or try to go to the gym or go for a walk, like I said. So that in between required me to have patience with myself. It required me to have grace, which is not something that I'm good at having for myself. And it's taught me now that like I'm out of that and I'm at a higher caliber for my life, that I can step back and I can have grace and I can still get what I need to get done because I've been at this lowest point. I think the final thing that really helped me in this in-between was self-reflection and realizing that there was a voice in my head telling me that I failed, right? There was a voice in my head, like I had spoken about previously, that I was going to lose these people. That was a lie. And there was a voice in my head saying that I failed because I had to move back home after trying to go out and live on my own in what is one of my favorite places on this earth. So does that mean I failed? It's reevaluating that question. And then honestly, it's redefining the story that I was telling myself. I was redefining the story I was telling myself. The story I was telling myself was I failed. I'm a failure because I tried to move and create something there and I had to come back. That was the story I was letting myself believe. But I decided to switch that story and say, hey, I succeeded because I went out there and I created a life for myself and I became who I was supposed to become living in Florida. And now it's a new chapter and I'm going to be out here and I'm going to find what that new chapter is and what it led to. And now, years later, 5 years later, I can say, okay, these are the reasons that I needed to come back out here. But at the time, it just felt like a failure. And so with time, those lies you let yourself believe dissolve and you realize the truth. But I think in the moment, it was important for me to have that mindset switch of like, am I actually a failure? Because if that's what you're hearing, then that's what you're believing. And therapy really helped me through that because she was able to identify those things that I was saying to myself, those narratives that I was believing. And she would ask me to have a different perspective on it. And I would spend time journaling. I would have conversations with her. I would have conversations with my sisters and say like, okay, is this actually true? Does anyone think I'm a failure? No, I think I'm a failure. And so how can I change that perspective and look at it a different way? And so if you're dealing with an in-between moment that's similar to this one that I just shared, I think the first thing you should do is look at your resources, expand your worldview, see who can help you, whether it is a doctor, a therapist, a psychologist, your friends, your family. See what you can do, small things every day that are going to help nourish your brain, nourish your body. Food, water, movement, even just sunshine. And then start paying attention. Maybe it's 1 minute a day to the recurring thoughts that are going on in your head. Evaluate them, write them down, and then take a second, step back and read what you wrote down and ask yourself if you truly believe that and if it is the truth. If it is, okay, face value, let's let that be the truth, but it probably isn't. And I ask you to switch the narrative and try to start focusing on the perspective that you want to believe. Because the more that your brain hears what you want to believe, the more it will actually believe that. So that's my in-between moment for this month. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks so much for tuning into the In-Between podcast. We'll catch you next time.